Hey everybody, I'm Daham with the Architecture Lobby, and I'm excited to introduce our fellow organizers at Netherlands Angry Architects. We met recently during a forum of international architecture organizations, and we're happy to have you all here again to kind of keep discussing working conditions and the kind of organizing struggles that have been going on in your location. So to start, when we ask, what is your goals at NAA? And what motivated you to join the organization?
We started about in 2022 and with support of Dutch labor union, FNV. And as a main goal for us, it was to draw architects and make them join the union. This is, I think, one of the key problems here in the Netherlands, that the union density is very low. And I think for both of us, we joined now the time when we were about to graduate-ish, and right after the graduation, and freshly entering the proper labor market here, and as a non-Dutch, it was for us very interesting to learn how it works, and that's how we got engaged, and we became angry as well. Do you want to add something to that?
Um, I think maybe it's perhaps nice to mention it actually started as like like a very casual workers' inquiry through failed architecture, and I responded. I was on my like third year of my education, so it's a master's education, it's a different program. And I responded because I was being stuck at as an intern for more than a year now at the time. And then I went there and I saw that there were like so many others like me. And then from there, it snowballed really. Like it was one person who suddenly set up everything. All of a sudden, we were Netherlands Agri Architects, and then all of a sudden, we had like this whole visual style. So it snowballed from there in a very casual and nice way.
Cool. And yeah, so what issues would you say architects in the Netherlands kind of face, and what is your organization doing to address those things?
I think that starting with the low density, low union density, this is, I think it kind of builds on top of that because there is a union, but there is very little architects that are part of the union. And we already have a collective labor agreement, which we know like from our fellow groups that this is something that in many countries is something that groups like us are fighting for. We already have it. But the problem for us, which is maybe an interesting example, is that it doesn't mean that it's being obeyed, and that doesn't mean that all the offices are following the rules that are there. And this is for us the biggest struggle. And it's not only about the work culture in the office of like, okay, are we obeying the law or not? But also a big problem of actually going around the law by the offices, because if they are not registered as architecture offices, but whatever it is, some form of organization that in the Netherlands can practice architecture, they don't need to follow the rules. And if therefore that specific branch there is no collective labor agreement, then there is no rules. And this is for us a very big problem because it seems like everything is set up, but in reality it's not working 100%.
And we are actually also currently facing risk of losing the collective labor agreement because the collective bargain that is being renewed every year is tied to the percentage of the employers that are member of the that are member of BNA, which is the employer representative. And right now, the current membership rate is really close to that threshold. And if it goes below that, there is not going to be a collective bargain. The union is not going to be able to represent us anymore. So that's why it's quite important for us to be able to encourage people to join the union so that we could at least preserve the status quo. And um, maybe something to also add is that a lot of the time when we interact with architectural employees, what we usually realize is that the perception of the collective bargain is only limited to the salary scale. So they just check the salary scale, and if they earn what the scale says, they believe that like their office follows the collective bargain. However, like collective bargain goes beyond that. So we also heard the stories where from the same office, two different employees reached out to us, and they said like one of them says that they earn as much and they're Dutch and it's great, and their office like abides by that. Whereas like the international worker is being exploited in the same office, so there's also these like pay gaps. So in that sense, some offices do look like they follow the collective labor agreement, but in reality, they actually don't, or they pick and choose how they apply it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's always interesting talking to architects in Europe, as there is kind of an existing kind of social democratic infrastructure and existing unions that exist, which is very different than the US or like much of the Anglosphere, where like there's very little union penetration in traditionally like blue collar work, and certainly not at all in white collar industries like architecture. So it's funny because we're dealing with the same issues very much, but kind of the political structures around them are, there are like real meaningful differences. I'm really curious what you think of the sort of institutions that govern architecture in the Netherlands or internationally. And yeah, what's it like working with existing union and, you know, broad question, lots of directions to take it.
I think it's yeah, I have to say I don't know how it's to work without it, if that makes sense, because they are there and you can count on them. You know, they
Yeah.
also give once you're a member, they give you a really nice support, like legal support, in case it's becoming really difficult with your employer and so on. You can always reach them and they help you, and they are doing this. But there is also, but this is the union that is there for workers, and there's a lot of different institutions that work within, like for the employers, and that's I think a very different situation, and then we need to negotiate a collective labor agreement with them. And I mean, we don't do it directly, but through the union representative.
Mhm.
And so that's a very interesting dynamic, and I think. And here in the Netherlands, I think this is also a very links back a bit to our problems, that architecture here is very, how to say that, maybe prominent, or like people look upon the Dutch projects, and especially from the like last 30, 50 years. And there's a lot of people coming to the Netherlands from abroad with a lot of
Hopes and dreams.
hopes, dreams, ambitions, and also privileges. And those people fuel the universities, workplaces, and also the institutions. And the discussions are often on a very high level, let's say. But we don't always like touch the ground in the basics of like what we actually do as workers, and that uh, it's actually we do work. It should be the base of what's happening. And I think they not only in the Netherlands, that they have a big responsibility of how the whole industry looks like. We're always a part of some sort of institution, be it a university office or a collective like us. And then when there is a group, there is a power. That the same applies for the union. But we just struggle a bit, I think, to be very present there. We don't want to admit that we are also working. Yeah. Do you want to adapt to this?
I think at least like the feeling I got both in the Netherlands but also back from my country of origin is that like every institution like comes with their own culture that is like parallel to what we're used to seeing, and that like widely common mindset to me always felt like it was like pounded like into our heads like quite early on, like from the first day of like architecture school. And now by the time we're done with school, like we are either too tired to question it, or we just forget to question it because like it's that's how much it's normalized. And moving from one traditional institution from another, like that could be the workforce, that could be like another educational institution, or it could be something else. you end up sort of inherently feeding into that culture. And when you go and talk to people on an individual level, everybody agrees that we are feeding into this culture, that it's not sustainable, and it's very unacceptable, and that we shouldn't keep on like this. So everybody agrees, but yet we fail to take action collectively. In my opinion, we uh, fail to take action institutionally, but like that is perhaps also what's like pounded into our heads from day one, that we must stay as individuals. We have to like act as individuals and become this like architect that like creates everything, that like creates the cities and everything. So we have to. That's I think that's my observation in general in terms of like the traditional institutions, or could be in Netherlands or like globally.
Yeah, that's all very relatable. The AIA, the Institute of Architects that governs us here in the US, claims to represent all architects, but it is very, very, very much just an employers organization, and all of its kind of policies and habits and uh, lobbying of the US government to conservative interests over the last few years is directly in the interest of the employers and solely them. And yeah, a lot of the situation you're describing sounds familiar. Which kind of to add on an extra question, yeah, what type of like kind of difficulties do you find in getting architectural workers to see themselves as workers? It sounds like that's a shared problem that we both have, just getting people to see themselves as not just like a future small business owner or future brilliant auteur artist, but a person who goes and sells their labor and produces surplus value for their boss.
Mm.
Who needs a union?
In the union. I think that there's two problems, let's say, or like reasons for that. First of all, and I think that's maybe the root of all of it, is that this profession is very exclusive. You need to be able to afford to study it wherever it is, even if you study in a place where you don't need to pay for your tuition, like there's many countries in Europe, for example, it's possible. You still need to pay a lot for the materials, for your models, prints, whatnot. You need your preparation before. It costs a lot of money, like from the beginning, it's gonna be expensive. And then the tuitions for the schools where you pay are also very high. So it also filters of like who can do this, like in most of the cases, of course, it's not 100%. And but like I think the general spirit is, and when you come from such a background where you are able to do this, like you don't want to admit that all the studies that you spent doing this, thinking that you are, like in this very privileged environment of people doing like something amazing. Like I remember this like a lecture of my very first year of my bachelor's. They're like, this is the best profession in the world, and this is what they tell you at school. Like you don't want to admit that this is not functioning.
Yeah.
That we studied, like it took me 8 years to finish and it was planned. This is not what I was told it would be, and this is not what I was expecting. And I am a worker now, and and I need the labor union. Like I consider myself a white collar worker now, but I should have a labor union like blue collar workers. So I think it's a very big like class disagreement here, and that people just don't want to admit that they are in this position they actually are, and like that they should not be looking upon this almighty architect designing everything, and then I think for many people, they, especially here in the Netherlands, they also don't see the need for doing this, but they are not maybe the majority, or like it's a group only, but they don't see the need because they have some sort of a backup, so they can function like this to some extent, but they're also needed for the union to function for the other ones.
I think I think besides of like getting people to accept that architecture is labor, we are also challenged with the problem of getting the people doing meaningful action, even after, like, even if they're already supporting us. For example, the international workers are like a big vulnerable community that are like exposed for exploitation in the industry, and they are already working in precarious conditions, obviously, and they do admit that they do agree that it is labor. They do agree to like all of these things, but this is their only income, and some of the people that we interact, they think that if they speak up and if they react to their conditions, they're going to be unemployed and they're not going to be able to go back into the industry, which is the only type of work they know how, like, what in terms of, you know, like earning an income. And on the exact opposite side, for the Dutch workers, uh, with a lot of them, even if they agree that this is labor, uh, they most of the time feel quite content with the amount they're earning. They just say that they have a stable job, so like they don't see the need to react to anything, or, you know, like take action against anything. So it's they're quite happy with a stable income, with like whatever like they're able to get, which could be arguably more than what the international worker gets. But still, like in some of the cases, we also do see that they're also being exploited because they also don't really know 100% about, like, they're also not really informed about their rights 100%.
Yeah, but it does have, yeah, just to add to what you're saying, like a different impact on their, in this context, privileged position. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, these are very familiar dynamics. It's even in organizing spaces, it's hard to get architects to not view themselves as like a unique special type of worker that's like different than everybody else who works. Like there's some sort of special thing about the work we do, what it creates, the effects it has, our own capacities that is like instilled in school and must be demystified to get people to kind of talk about simple things like how many hours do you work, and are you like dependent on a visa and you had to work extra hours now so you can stay in this country, which is relatable. But kind of to close out, you know, a lot of viewers are going to see this from across the world. Some may be in the Netherlands, some might not. But what kind of advice would you give to folks who are interested in getting involved in the issues you're dealing with, both in the Netherlands and kind of outside, but in similar positions?
I would say talk to your colleagues first. Did you know it doesn't need to be that you go on a protest immediately? You know, it can be just go on talk to your coworker like about this. How are you feeling here? If you feel that something is not working, or like make sure, like reflect on this. Try if you see that your situation mirrors like in different people's perspectives, like that means that there's something not going well, and to change anything we need some sort of collective power. And it can be like the one room in your office, then it can go to the whole floor, then it can go to the whole office, then we can go broader. You can join groups like us. We've collecting an amazing, I think, portfolio of all the groups here with these talks. And definitely while doing so, join a union if it's possible, because they always stand for you um, there.
And maybe most important of it all is that, like, recognize you're also a worker. Recognize the amount of physical and mental labor you have to put into your work daily. recognize that architecture is very much labor, and that like we are educated to think otherwise. Architecture firms essentially benefit from projecting, like, or not really architecture firms, but employers benefit from projecting like their image of the company as a studio or collective or as a family, so that, like, you know, it's composed of people who are following their dreams, or who are following their aspirations and ambitions, so that like it doesn't feel like work, but it is work and it is labor.